Welcome back, Mitchell Mustangs. Happy Tuesday, May 5th. Thank you so much for watching another video. I can't wait to read today. So something that I know that I do as a reader that really helps me tremendously is that I understand that when I'm reading complicated books that I have to chunk information, and I have to figure out a way to help myself to chunk that information, because then each time that I stop reading, I can stop and think about the chunks of information to then summarize what's been important inside of the text. So there are different ways to chunk information, and one way really is the house image that I shared with you of putting characters in each room of a house all underneath one roof and coming together in the center hallway. That's how all the characters meet. The railroad tracks, that is another way to chunk information. In this book, the railroad tracks makes a lot of sense to me because of the way Louis Sachar has written the book, in this idea that he shares the present, not all of it, and then fills in the past, not all of it, and we have to keep reading, and we see the connection with the slats between the two rails. So this idea of chunking is really what we're doing, and there's a tremendous amount of brain research that suggests that it goes into a whole nother part of our brain when we chunk information, and that's how we remember it. So the key is to be very aware of chunking this information, and also to be aware of focusing on what is important. It feels like everything is important in this book as we're reading along. So that is something to do. So is it important that Stanley shrugs his shoulder? I'm not sure. Is it important that Sam, we learned about Sam, and Sam sells onions, and Kate Barlow is the teacher of the town of Green Lake? These are all important things, I think, but we have to read on. So let's read on today. As we're reading together, think about, how are you chunking information? Do you sort of chunk by characters some days, and some days that makes sense? Do you chunk by the characters and the events, maybe moving along because the railroad track in the present and the past? So think about that, and we're going to talk more about it tomorrow. But today, let's read on, and let's gather more information to figure out what's going on, filling in the holes of the story. Okay, so we left off when they were talking about how Sam sold the onions, and the doctor in town didn't mind. Doc Hawthorne was almost completely bald, and in the morning his head often smelled like onions. So he appreciated Sam. That was great, that was great information. So we're going to continue on. Whenever Katherine Barlow bought onions, she always bought an extra one or two and would let Mary Lou eat them out of her hand. Is something wrong? Sam asked her one day as she was feeding Mary Lou. You seem distracted. Oh, just the weather, said Miss Katherine. It looks like rain clouds moving in. Me and Mary Lou, we like the rain, said Sam. Oh, I like it fine, said Miss Katherine, as she rubbed the donkey's rough hair on top of its head. It's just that the roof leaks in the schoolhouse. I can fix it, said Sam. What are you going to do? Katherine joked. Fill the holes with onion paste? Sam laughed. I'm good with my hands, he told her. I built my own boat. If it leaked, I'd be in big trouble. Katherine couldn't help but notice his strong, firm hands. They made a deal. He agreed to fix the leaky roof in exchange for 6 jars of spiced peaches. It took Sam a week to fix the roof because he could only work in the afternoons after school let out and before night classes began. Sam wasn't allowed to attend classes because he was a Negro, but they let him fix the building. Miss Katherine usually stayed in the schoolhouse grading papers and such, while Sam worked on the roof. She enjoyed what little conversation they were able to have, shouting up and down to each other. She was surprised by his interest in poetry. When he took a break, she would sometimes read a poem to him. On more than one occasion, she would start to read a poem by Poe or Longfellow, only to hear him finish it for her from memory. She was sad when the roof was finished. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "No, you did a wonderful job," she said. "It's just that the windows won't open. The children and I would enjoy a breeze now and then." "I can fix that," said Sam. She gave him 2 more jars of peaches, and Sam fixed the windows. It was easier to talk to him when he was working on the windows. He told her about his secret onion field on the other side of the lake, where the onions grow all year round, and the water runs uphill. When the windows were fixed, she complained that her desk wobbled. "I can fix that," said Sam. The next time she saw him, she mentioned that the door doesn't hang straight, and she got to spend a whole nother afternoon with him while he fixed the door. By the end of the first semester, Onion Sam had turned the old rundown schoolhouse into a well-crafted, freshly painted jewel of a building that the whole town was proud of. People passing by would stop and admire. "That's our schoolhouse. It shows how much we value education here in Green Lake." The only person who wasn't happy with it was Miss Katherine. She'd run out of things needing to be fixed. She sat at her desk one afternoon, listening to the pitter-patter of the rain on the roof. No water leaked in the classroom, except for a few drops that came from her eyes. "Onions! Hot, sweet onions!" Sam called out on the street. She ran to him. She wanted to throw her arms around him, but couldn't bring herself to do it. Instead, she hugged Mary Lou's neck. "Is something wrong?" asked Sam. "Oh, Sam," she said, "my heart is breaking." "I can fix that," said Sam. She turned to him. He took both of her hands and kissed her. Because of the rain, there was nobody else out on the street. Even if there was, Katherine and Sam wouldn't have noticed. They were lost in their own world. At that moment, however, Hattie Parker stepped out of the general store. They didn't see her, but she saw them. She pointed her quivering finger in their direction and whispered, "God punish you." Chapter 26. There were no telephones, but word spread quickly through the small town. By the end of the day, everyone in Green Lake had heard that the school teacher had kissed the onion picker. Not one child showed up for school the next morning. Miss Katherine sat alone in the classroom and wondered if she had lost track of the day of the week. Perhaps it was Saturday. It wouldn't have surprised her. Her brain and heart had been spinning ever since she kissed Sam. She heard a noise outside the door. Then suddenly a mob of men and women came storming into the school building. They were led by Trout Walker. "There she is!" Trout shouted. "The devil woman!" The mob was turning over desks and ripping down bulletin boards. "She's been poisoning your children's brains with books," Trout declared. They began piling all the books in the center of the room. "Think about what you're doing!" cried Miss Katherine. Someone made a grab for her, tearing her dress, but she managed to get out of the building. She ran to the sheriff's office. The sheriff had his feet up on his desk and was drinking from a bottle of whiskey. "Mornin', Miss Katherine," he said. They're destroying the schoolhouse," she said, gasping for breath. "They'll burn it to the ground if somebody doesn't stop them." "Just calm yourself down a second," the sheriff said in a slow drawl, "and tell me what you're talking about." He got up from his desk and walked over to her. "Trout Walker has—" "Now, don't go saying nothing bad about Charles Walker," said the sheriff. "We don't have much time," urged Katherine. "You've got to stop them." "You're sure pretty," said the sheriff. Miss Katherine stared at him in horror. "Kiss me," said the sheriff. She slapped his face. He laughed. You kissed the onion picker. Why won't you kiss me? She tried to slap him again, but he caught her by the hand. She tried to wiggle free. You're drunk, she yelled. I always get drunk before a hanging. A hanging? Who? It's against the law for a Negro to kiss a white woman. Well, then you'll have to hang me too, said Katherine, because I kissed him back. It ain't against the law for you to kiss him, the sheriff explained, just for him to kiss you. We're all equal under the eyes of God, she declared. The sheriff laughed. Then, if Sam and I are equal, why won't you kiss me? He laughed again. I'll make you a deal. One sweet kiss and I won't hang your boyfriend. I'll just run him out of town. Miss Katherine jerked her hand free. As she hurried to the door, she heard the sheriff say, The law will punish Sam, and God will punish you. She stepped back into the street and saw smoke rising from the schoolhouse. She ran down to the lakefront where Sam was hitching Mary Lou to the onion cart. Thank God I found you, she sighed, hugging him. We've got to get out of here now. What? Someone must have seen us kissing yesterday, she said. They set the schoolhouse on fire. The sheriff said he's going to hang you. Sam hesitated for a moment, as if he couldn't quite believe it. He didn't want to believe it. Come on, Mary Lou. We have to leave Mary Lou behind, said Katherine. Sam stared at her a moment. There were tears in her eyes. Okay. Sam's boat was in the water, tied to a tree by a long rope. He untied it, and they waded through the water and climbed aboard. His powerful arms rowed them away from the shore, with tears in his eyes, looking back at Mary Lou. But his powerful arms were no match for Trout Walker's motorized boat. They were little more than halfway across the lake when Miss Katherine heard the loud roar of the engine. Then she saw the ugly black smoke. These are the facts. The Walker boat smashed into Sam's boat. Sam was shot and killed in the water. Katherine Barlow was rescued against her wishes. When they returned to the shore, she saw Mary Lou's body lying on the ground. The donkey had been shot in the head. That all happened 110 years ago. Since then, not one drop of rain has fallen on Green Lake. You make the decision. Whom did God punish? 3 days after Sam's death, Miss Katherine shot the sheriff while he was sitting in his chair drinking a cup of coffee. Then she carefully applied a fresh coat of red lipstick and gave him the kiss he had asked for. For the next 20 years, Kissin' Kate Barlow was one of the most feared outlaws in all of the West. So I'm going to stop here. Wow, what a chapter. And I want to put together in a chunk everything that I've learned about Katherine, and now known as Kissing Kate Barlow. And I want to chunk it all together. So we first learned about this Kissing Kate Barlow. So we actually learned the past first. That's where she was introduced. And then we have come back to, we learned the past, but inside of the present. Then we went back into the past when she was known as Miss Katherine, this lovely, wonderful school teacher who loved to teach children, even taught the adults in the evening. She loved so much teaching. And this terrible terrible event has happened just because two people love each other. I'm chunking this together, and I think that although it's in the middle of the story, that this is a very important piece of information. This is a very important event that has happened. And so it's super important for me to piece it all together, connect the lipstick, the KB, because it says right here in the text, I can stop here, I can think as I'm chunking it together. She went back to that sheriff, in my opinion, the terrible sheriff, and she killed him. And she put a fresh coat of lipstick and kissed him. So we now know kissing Kate Barlow. And we also fill in that chunk of information. We know why she is an outlaw, what has happened. So that's how I chunk information together, and it could be that I'm using my house image and I've put her in a room and I've chunked it together to then connect it. Or it could be that I'm using the railroad image and I've got the present day, what's happening here, the story of her, the story of kissing Kate Barlow, and then the past of Miss Katherine, who turns into kissing Kate Barlow. So I just wanted to share how I was chunking that and how important it is to stop, think, chunk it so we can move forward, because that's going to help me to summarize the whole book when I summarize many parts of the book. Let's read on just a little bit more. What a chapter. Chapter 27. Stanley dug his shovel into the ground. His hole was about 3.5 feet deep in the center. He grunted as he pried up some dirt, then flung it off to the side. The sun was almost directly overhead. He glanced at his canteen lying beside his hole. He knew it was half full, but he didn't take a drink yet. He had to drink sparingly because he didn't know who would be driving the water truck the next time it came. 3 days had passed since the warden had scratched Mr. Sir. Every time Mr. Sir delivered water, he poured Stanley straight onto the ground. Fortunately, Mr. Pendanski delivered the water more often than Mr. Sir. Mr. Pendanski was obviously aware of what Mr. Sir was doing because he always gave Stanley a little extra. He filled Stanley's canteen, then let Stanley take a long drink, then top it off for him. It helped, too, that Zero was digging some of Stanley's hole for him. Although, as Stanley had expected, the other boys didn't like to see Stanley sitting around while they were working. They said things like, "Who died and made you a king?" Or, "It must be nice to have your own personal slave." Oh, what a terrible thing to say. When he tried pointing out that he was the one who took the blame for the sunflower seeds, and the other boys said it was his fault because he was the one who spilled them. "I risked my life for those seeds," Magnet had said, "and all I got was one lousy handful." Stanley had also tried to explain that he needed to save his energy so he could teach Zero how to read, but the other boys just mocked him. "Same old story, ain't it, Armpit?" X-Ray had said. "The white boy sits around while the black boy does all the work. Ain't that right, caveman?" "No, that's not right," Stanley replied. "No, it ain't," X-Ray agreed. "It ain't right at all." Stanley dug out another shovelful of dirt. He knew X-Ray wouldn't have been talking like this if he was the one teaching Zero to read. Then X-Ray will be talking about how important it was that he got his rest, right? So he could be a better teacher, right? And that was true. He did need to save his strength so he could be a better teacher, although Zero was a quick learner. Sometimes, in fact, Stanley hoped the warden was watching them with her secret cameras and microphones so she'd know that Zero wasn't as stupid as everyone thought. From across the lake, he could see the approaching dust cloud. He took a drink from his canteen, then waited to see who was driving the truck. Mitchell Mustangs. Wow. A lot. A lot of things, a lot of themes emerge inside of this book. And that's why it's so helpful to have strategies. So as we're paying close attention to the text, how do we chunk the information together? Because if someone were to ask me, so what happened in Holes? What was it about? I'd want to be able to summarize. And there's so many things going on in this book, so many characters, so many events that I want to have made sure that as I read, I chunked it together so that by the time I get to the end, I can go from beginning to the end and only focus on the most important events of the book, the events that push the story forward to be able to summarize. And those events are chunked together. And it helps me when I chunk them together to remember. Whether, again, I use the house image of characters inside of a room connected to the hallway or the railroad tracks. Works really well with this book because of the past and the present. So, Mitchell Mustangs. As you read your independent reading books, I invite you to pay close attention to that text and chunk important pieces of information together that go together. This will help you to remember what you're reading, and you won't miss out on the major events of the story to learn the author's purpose and the themes of the book and learn from the characters as well. So Mitchell Mustangs, the last thing I want to say to you today is stay healthy, happy reading, happy writing. Thank you.